I can't stand living with a sneaky woman like you anymore.
With those words, my mother-in-law shouted at me and threw a vase that was nearby. Why do I have to be told like this after all I've done for her? It's unforgivable. She doesn't even know how much I've done for her. I'll show her what would happen if I weren't here. My name is Sarah, a 37-year-old full-time homemaker. I've been married to Zachary for 15 years. Zachary is so busy with work that he comes home past midnight and often has to travel for business. I wanted to support him and that's why I got married, but we didn't have much couple time. Then, I received a call that Zachary's mother, my mother-in-law, had collapsed. Zachary couldn't go to see her right away because of work. And since Zachary's sister, Kate, lived far away, I went to the hospital alone first. Fortunately, she had no brain damage, but when she fell, she severely injured her spine and couldn't walk on her own anymore. After Zachary and Kate arrived, we decided that since my husband and I lived relatively close and it wouldn't affect my job, we would move into his parents' house to take care of his mother. Kate apologized many times, saying,
"I'm sorry for the trouble even though you married into our family."
"But as family, it's normal to help each other out when someone is in trouble." I had no experience with caregiving and was anxious, but I decided to do my best.
Sarah, what is this meal? How can you serve such awful food to a sick person?
Saying this, my mother-in-law flipped over the dishes on the table. I made the soup carefully, but it all dripped onto the floor, and I brought a rag to start cleaning up. As I was cleaning, my mother-in-law continued to berate me.
Seriously, for being someone who's a daughter-in-law and can't even prepare a decent meal, it seems Zachary has spoiled you, but I won't stand for it.
What I've come to realize since we started living together is that my mother-in-law acts quite willfully. Doing housework while caring for someone is tough. There's absolutely no time to share, and it's impossible to do everything carefully one by one. Naturally, I've started cutting corners where I can, but my mother-in-law wouldn't forgive that. Even now, because I was short on time, I used ready-made stock for the soup, and this is the thanks I get.
A daughter-in-law is supposed to live her life devoting her whole heart and soul to ensure her husband and his family have a satisfying life. And yet you dare to cut corners. That's absolutely inexcusable.
No matter what she says, I simply don't have the time to do so. I'm the only one doing all the caregiving and household chores by myself. Zachary doesn't help me at all. He just keeps working as usual, coming home late at night, or sometimes not coming home at all because he's staying somewhere else, completely neglecting his family. I've asked my husband to help even a little with the caregiving, but
Do you expect me to do such dirty work?
he just yells at me and does not even listen to me. Why do a person like me, who is a stranger to his mother, have to do all these difficult things alone? I've asked myself this question many times but never dared to say it out loud. I simply didn't have the courage or the time to say that.
Sarah, hey Sarah, I'm hungry. Make me something?
One night, as I was deeply asleep, recovering from the day's fatigue, I woke up by my mother-in-law's voice echoing through the house. I hurried to the room where my mother-in-law is sleeping, and she said she was hungry and told me to make something or go buy something if I couldn't cook. Thinking that it was dangerous to cook while half asleep, I got her consent to go out and buy something. On my way back, I was shocked seeing something. Across the neon-lit street, I saw somebody who was a familiar. It was my husband, Zachary. Next to him there was a flamboyantly dressed woman. They were walking side by side, arm in arm. They headed straight into a hotel of that sort. I realized immediately it was an affair. In a panic, I took pictures as evidence. I couldn't organize my thoughts. Zachary having an affair? Then what have I been working so hard for? While I've been suffering at the hands of his mother, Zachary was having fun all the time? How long has this been going on? Was all the late nights and frequent business trips because he was having an affair? Was he involved with her for even longer? With my mind in a mess, I kept walking until I found myself back at home. I handed the purchases to my mother-in-law, and as I watched her, she said,
Is there something wrong with you?
I couldn't be calm at that moment, I think. Perhaps I thought that she was showing concern for me in her way, but I told her straight what I had seen.
I saw it myself.
I saw Zachary cheating. At my words, my mother-in-law turned red with anger and shouted.
Don't lie.
I showed her the pictures to prove it, thinking that she'd have to accept it if there was evidence. But it was not so easy as I thought. When my mother-in-law saw the proof, she threw my smartphone far away. Hey, mother-in-law! I tried to stop her, but it was too late. My phone had already struck the wall with force. I hurried to pick it up, only to find the screen was dark and wouldn't turn on. I realized immediately it was broken. Why did you do that? I shouted at her in anger. With a dismissive laugh through her nose, my mother-in-law said,
That's for showing me such unpleasant things.
I understood then that she wanted to get rid of the photos as an evidence. Doing such things. Why won't she and Zachary consider my feelings? Why am I always ignored? No matter how many times I ask to myself, there's no one to answer. I stood alone amidst an unreasonable sorrow. During this time, I received a message from Kate and her husband. They were offering me to take in my mother-in-law temporarily. Kate had always been considerate towards me, asking if the caregiving was too hard, if her mother was complaining, if Zachary was helping properly. I wanted to tell her the truth, but I was afraid it would ruin our relationship. So all I could say was, I'm fine. Kate and her husband run their own business and are busy even during the Bond Festival and New Year's holidays. But they couldn't let me handle it alone indefinitely. So they offered to take my mother-in-law in for a while. When my mother-in-law heard the news, she was pleased and said,
Finally, I'll be free from you.
But I soon realized that she was misunderstanding the situation. Kate's offer was only temporary. My mother-in-law was already trying to contact movers and wanted to send her belongings to Kate's house. When I stopped her and explained that it was only a temporary arrangement, she became furious and yelled at me.
I can't stand living with a sneaky woman like you. I want to live with Kate. Can't you listen to what your mother-in-law says?
She was so angry that she grabbed a vase nearby and threw it at me. I thought that it was dangerous just in time, but the shards flew and I was cut on the cheek. Looking at my face, my mother-in-law laughed mockingly.
You look like a monster. Suits you perfectly. That's what you get for saying horrible things to me. I don't need a worthless daughter-in-law like you.
Standing there dazed, the cruel words from my mother-in-law kept coming. She cursed me as a worthless daughter-in-law. I felt like I couldn't take it anymore. I've done my best for her. But she didn't appreciate any of it. No matter how much I tried to reach out, she kept her distance, pushing me away. Feeling I had reached my limit, I grabbed a light bag and left the house. I needed to escape as soon as possible. The only place I could go was my parents' house. Seeing my face after so long, my parents turned pale. I must have looked worn out. When they took me into the living room, and as I took a sip of the tea my mother had made, the tears started to flow. Soon after, I received a message from Kate. Apparently, she thought something was wrong after seeing the house. I told Kate that I wanted her to take my mother-in-law as we planned and that I needed to be away from her for a while. It seemed to work out with Kate and her husband's schedule, and they took my mother-in-law in. That night, Kate called me again. And after her questions, I could only widen my eyes in shock.
Sarah, were you being harassed by your mother-in-law?
When I asked her why she thought that, it seems that the mother-in-law, who was taken in by Kate and her husband, had been bad-mouthing me as a terrible daughter-in-law. Kate had been in touch with me, which is why she felt something was off about her mother's statements. When I said yes, Kate just kept apologizing, saying that they would take care of my mother-in-law for a while so I could take it easy, and that I should make decisions for my future without considering them. Right after that, I got a slew of messages from my mother-in-law. Kate must have scolded her.
Why did you tell Kate? I got scolded because of you. A useless daughter-in-law who can't even defend her own mother-in-law.
I took pictures of all those messages and sent them to Kate. Maybe my mother-in-law would get told off again. This gave time to be more comfortable and the chance to start planning for my future. Zachary, who hardly ever came home, knew that his mother had gone to stay with Kate and her husband but seemed unaware that I was gone too. I turned that to my advantage and hired a detective. In just a couple of days, they had found a mountain of evidence. I always had a feeling that something was strange with Zachary not coming home until late. But now it makes sense. He had been spending his nights with another woman. But I knew that he had no right to live like that. That made it all the harder to forgive him. When I called Zachary and asked him to come to my parents' house, he showed up reluctantly. I confronted him with the pictures the detective had given me, and he admitted to the affair right away. However, when I said I was going to ask for alimony, he broke down and begged.
Please, give me a break about the alimony. I don't have any money. You know I can't pay it, right?
Yes, Zachary couldn't pay alimony even if he was asked to. Because he had already lost his job. When we started living with my mother-in-law, Zachary got into trouble at work. He had a fight with a subordinate and ended up hitting them. The subordinate didn't go to the police out of compassion, but Zachary was given an ultimatum to leave the company, and he resigned. Since then, he went to find job, leaving the house early in the morning. I assumed his late return to house was because he was seriously looking for work, but I realized that day that I had been mistaken. Of course, with no income from Zachary, I had to earn money myself, so I was working from home. I was paying all the living expenses for his family's home. The only reason I did so much was that Zachary and my mother-in-law were family, but honestly, after all this, I couldn't bring myself to keep trying to support them. Zachary didn't agree easily, so I kicked him out, telling him I'd hire a lawyer later. After a couple of days, I got a message from Kate.
I'm sorry, Sarah. I had no idea it was this bad.
It seems Kate and her husband had underestimated my mother-in-law. According to Kate, as soon as my mother-in-law came at their home, she started demanding specific foods, and when they made the usual meals, she complained that the cooking had gotten worse. At bedtime, she would complain about everything, like the pillow was too hard or the lights being too dim. Kate and her husband tried to accommodate her as much as possible, but there were limits. When they told my mother-in-law she was overstepping her boundaries, she would throw a tantrum and anything within reach. Apparently, their house was a wreck within a few days.
I never thought it would be this bad. We'll handle Mom's situation. I'm truly sorry.
Kate apologized to me multiple times. In the end, I divorced Zachary and demanded alimony. He begged and cried until the very end, but I had no compassion left for him. If he had recognized what was going on with my mother-in-law, I might have been willing to keep trying with him. But it was too much for me. Though I demanded alimony from Zachary, of course, he had no way to pay it. He obviously turned to his family's home, and that's when my former mother-in-law learned for the first time that Zachary was unemployed. And the amount of alimony was substantial, so much so that she must have thought it was beyond her means because I received many messages from her begging for forgiveness. The phone calls were so frequent and annoying that I deleted her contact information and made sure she could no longer reach me. However, I owed a debt of gratitude to Kate, so I left her with my contact information. She had always been on my side, and the thought of cutting ties with her was too sad. I heard the rest from Kate. Apparently, my former mother-in-law gave up on Zachary. No job, can't do housework, certainly can't provide care, and to top it off, he's saddled with a debt under the name of alimony. It seems she couldn't do anything for him. Zachary is now working at a factory with a live-in arrangement, working day and night, frantically. But all of that goes to his debt payments, so he lives without any entertainment. He turned to Kate for help, but she and her husband decided to abandon him. I guess it was a wise decision. There's nothing good in keeping such a man around them. And it seems Kate and her husband have given up on my former mother-in-law as well. At first, they let her do what she wanted to do because she won't be around much longer, but as her demands escalated and started to impact their own lives, they cut her off without mercy. My former mother-in-law is now in a care facility, arranged by Kate and her husband. Ironically, the whole reason I ended up caring for her was that she did not want to be in a facility. But with no one left to rely on but Kate and her husband, she couldn't resist their decision. Messages like,
I'm lonely.
And
I want to see you.
comes from her in the facility. According to the staff, she often throws tantrums when her whims aren't indulged, leading the staff to keep their distance.
Really put you through a lot, didn't I? I'm sorry.
Kate said that to me in apology. And so, I was free from everything. As for me, the work I had been doing from home started to take off, and I began earning a decent income. I'm now making more than the average company employee and living in a mansion. Once I lived with Zachary, I thought marriage was nothing worthwhile, but through my work, I met a man and we started dating. He sees me for who I am and says I'm hardworking, which has helped to boost the self-esteem that had been low. The wounds I've sustained haven't fully healed yet, so I don't have the courage to walk with him into the future. But I hope that one day I can take that step.